Welcome to 70 times 7, the platform where the dynamics of forgiveness is explored. Before I introduce our guests again today, I'd like to relate a story to you that I've just found out. Senator Mark Hatfield recounts the following history. He says, James Garfield was a lay preacher and principal of his denominational college. They say he was ambidextrous and could simultaneously write Greek with one hand and Latin with the other. In 1880, he was elected president of the United States of America. But after only 6 months in office, he was shot in the back with a revolver. He never lost consciousness. At the hospital, the doctor probed the wound with his little finger to seek the bullet. He couldn't find it. So he tried a silver-tipped probe. Still, he couldn't locate the bullet. They took Garfield to Washington, D.C. Despite the summer heat, they tried to keep him comfortable. He was growing very weak. Teams of doctors were gathered together to locate the bullet, probing the wound over and over again. In desperation, they asked Alexander Graham Bell, who was working on a little device at that time called the telephone, to see if he could locate the metal inside the president's body. He came, he sought, and he too failed. The president hung on through July, through August, but in September he died. Not from the wound, but from the infection of that wound. The repeated probing, which the physicians thought would help the man, eventually killed him. So it is with people who dwell too long on their sins and on past hurts and refuse to release it to God. In the studio today, I have with me Dr. June Negre and Pastor Busi Bartholomew Kumalo. Welcome again and thank you for joining us on 70 times 7. This, when I recall this story, I'm amazed at the effect that we can avoid just by forgiving. Because to probe and to find out, there are sometimes you really want to know. You want to know who's responsible for the pain and the trauma that I am going through.
The irony of this story is that the doctors were trying to help the man, but in the process they were actually destroying the man.
Yeah. You see, when the wound is open and it doesn't heal, it doesn't only affect the person that has the wound, but it affects everybody around him. Because he's carrying and it's becomes smelly and all this, they all become involved with it. So that wound, if you carry it with you, be it physical or emotional or psychological or mental, it really wears you down.
So can we just at this point categorically say that when we are offended or when we are hurt or when we are aggrieved, the best thing is not to try and prove who is at fault, who has done what, but the best thing is to forgive immediately. We can work out the details later, but to forgive immediately, you stop the infection.
You see, Paul, that is the balm of Gilead. That forgiveness heals it, covers it. It's like a poultice that
you put on the wound.
That once it's there, it's on the way for it's on the way for healing.
June, I have a friend of mine. I lived in a youth center before. And the boys who came to this youth center, they were very interesting. They were very good boys. Of course, I was there. But this one friend of mine, I visited him recently. And I went to the place where he works. And I asked for him, Busi. And they told me there's no such man working here. I just spoke to him. And he told me, this is where I work, this is the address, just come and I'll meet you there. So here I am. And the security checked the list of employees and the offices. He was not listed. And so I called him on my cell phone and I told him, listen, I'm right outside, or maybe I'm at the wrong building because nobody here is aware of you. I told him, I know you're not as famous as me, but at least, at least the security should know that you are in the building.
Yeah.
He told me, I have to tell you something, but stay right there. So I waited, he came down and he took me up to his office. When I went to his office, he sat me down and he told me, Paul, all the experiences we've been through our childhood, because we came from troubled childhoods. We, both sides, we had alcoholic parents and, the things that come with that.
Yeah.
So we were removed by social workers, placed in this children's home first, and then in this youth center. Then then I asked him, why doesn't the guys here know who you are? He said, when I left youth center, that means when he left the institution, one of the first things that he did, as soon as he passed high school, he changed his name.
Wow.
Oh, I see. Okay.
He wanted to forget his past.
Yeah. He thought that by changing his name, he can forget everything in the past. And I asked him, why did you change your name? He says, what we've been through was so terrible.
Sure.
I don't want anything to do with it. But as I listened to him, the pain of his experiences, which I've also been through,
Yeah.
the pain and the headache and all the traumatic experiences we've been through is still with him. You can hear that he's hurt. He's bitter and he is pain. Changing the name did not undo what has taken place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the question that I have in my mind, and maybe you at home also have the question, what is the secret, or what is the way we can walk in order to overcome childhood experiences, the way to let go of our maybe dysfunctional family upbringing, which we find in our lives as well. Before I allow you to comment on this, June, there's another friend of mine. I visited his family recently, and I was introduced to all his sisters. They were so excited to see me after many years. Of course, everyone gets excited when they see me. But they were excited to see me. And when I was there, we started talking about, our experiences. Man, it was so good to reminisce. Even though we were in institutions, it was so good to remember the good times we played together and what we did. But his sisters began to cry. They cried because they still haven't come to terms with what happened.
Sure.
And they asked me the question, Paul, how is it possible for you to speak about what happened as though it's a joke freely?
Yeah.
When we get back, we'll talk about what makes it possible to transcend hurtful, painful childhood experiences and be free to be all that God wants us to be. Please stay right with us.